Welcome back to another episode of our month-long Women in STEM series in honor of Women's History Month. I'm Belen Cacho, an geneticist and science communicator. Along with this interview series, for the entire month of March, we are raising money for Girls Who Code. Together, we can help close the gender gap in the technology fields. Please find the donation link in the show notes. Today, we're joined by RockitSage, a geologist, teacher, and one of the pioneers of science on Twitch. We discuss playing with Barbies in the mud, her love for the arts, skipping school to go visit mountains, her life changing moment in the Mojave Desert, being the first in her family to earn a college degree, her journey into a career in geology, and her extensive lab work. We are lucky and honored to have today the incredible Rocket Sage, y'all. This is a real life geologist. This is a real life professor. This is a real life Twitch partner, content creator. We have been watching her for at least 5 years now. And she has been an inspiration to us. She is an inspiration to women in STEM everywhere. She is the founder of the Knowledge Fellowship, along with Dr. WD-40 and Uncle Bill Druin, who I'm sure we'll get into as well. And she will not fully admit this because she is extremely humble, but there would be no science category on this platform without her being the pioneer of it. So, guys, I am honored to have today on the stream Rocket Sage. Sage, welcome in.
Hi guys. Thank you very much for that warm welcome. That was very kind.
Always.
I'm very excited to be here. I very much look up to you, both you and Lita, and the little one. She's so cute. And I just very very happy to be here. The work you've been doing is fantastic, and I'm just so glad Twitch and has you as an ambassador. I've wanted to say that live with you for a long time. I'm just very grateful for the way education is moving right now on Twitch. It makes me very, very happy to see, and I appreciate so much the support towards women because, women in STEM, we rock. We're awesome.
And not just as a geology joke, but y'all are
No,
awesome.
no, yeah.
Y'all do rock, and there's a long-standing underrepresentation. And by highlighting our hope is all these incredible content creators, you know, let's put y'all at the forefront as you should be. It's something that's really near and dear to both me and Lita. Not always for the best of reasons, right? There's been a lot of unfortunately discrimination against women in the sciences.
Mhm.
But by being upfront and like being forward, hoped we can make a change with that. We would love to get your backstory, Sage, on how you got into the sciences. We're going to talk a little bit about you as a content creator, but just
Sure.
to take us back to the beginning, Sage, when did you get interested in science, and did you always think rocks would be what you would study?
Actually, no. I was always into the sciences as a little girl. I've always loved reading. We didn't really have a TV. We grew up pretty poor, so I just had a lot of books. And one of the things I remember, the first career I really wanted was to be a marine biologist, actually. And I had marine biology books. I had little, instead of paper dolls, I had these little paper whales, and each one had facts on which whale it was. My favorite whale to this day, is a humpback whale. I love humpback whales. I think they're absolutely gorgeous. I hope to someday learn to scuba dive so that I can hang on the fin of one and glide through the ocean. So that was kind of my, I guess, precursor. Around the same time, I had a rock tumbler, and I would collect and tumble rocks because my luckily, early on, my mother was very hands-on, so I was able to learn a lot early, and I'm very grateful for that. So I had a rock tumbler, I had all this stuff about marine biology, I was just always learning stuff. I was a very curious kid, I was outside a lot. I'd always and I oh, this is another precursor to geology. I didn't realize at the time I was going to be a geologist, but I played with my Barbies in the dirt. Soil science, it's part of geology. And it I don't know. I don't know why. We just had this little dirt pit outside and I would put my Barbies in it. And I was just kind of a wild little chaotic thing and grew up making barnyard noises, apparently. That's what my parents would say. Barnyard noises. And it today is, on Twitch, you can go to my channel and see all the barnyard noises I continuously make to this day. They never stopped. I don't know why. And it's funny, in middle school, I don't really have a lot of memory of what I wanted to do or what I wanted to be. But in high school, I was actually more into the arts. I wrote a lot of music and I took like 5 years of French because I started I continued French into college, but I ended up almost with a minor in French, and that was quite strange, but I did a lot of music things, and I was asked to write a song I had written a song in French, my senior year of high school, and I was asked to perform it at a language, festival. So I did that, which was terrifying to me because to this day, even getting in front of my students in a classroom, at a university classroom scares me. To this not scares me, but I get anxiety. They say sometimes like, "Oh, with practice it goes away." Like, sometimes it doesn't. But, I continued to perform, and I did a lot of music. I wrote a lot of music. I have 4 songs, that's it, that were recorded in a studio because I was asked to do vocals a lot, and instead of getting paid, monetarily, I asked for my songs to be recorded and mixed, so that's what they did instead, and so I thought I was gonna be a musician. My first, when I went off to college, I was my major was music theory. I really wanted that was what it was gonna be, and my freshman year I was in honors. I had actually, there was an environmental science AP class I took in high school that really, really started making me think about nature more because I'm from Oregon, by the way, and I grew up out in the boonies on a gravel road in a trailer, and
With a
we
dirt
had
pile in front of the house.
with a dirt pile, and we were like Ozark Ranch. Legitimately, my parents did call it the Ozark Ranch, and, I'd ran in rubber boots in the spring because Oregon's very rainy. It's like 3/4 of the year, it just rains and rains and rains. We had a little creek that would flow through the back. I was kind of a strange kid. I didn't have a lot of friends, but I had nature and my cat, and I loved going out and, sitting I we had this pallet over this creek and this beautiful dome of foliage that just kind of folded over that. There were some raspberry bushes and some fir trees and some deciduous trees, and it was it was just glorious. So, like, I grew up with this huge love of nature. That was a huge part of that, and I grew up camping, and I actually started hunting when I was 12 years old. I got my first, doe tag when I was 12 years old, learned how to shoot rifles and things when I was a little girl, and I grew up with a very huge respect for nature and animals. My grandfather, when he would hunt, we'd use all of the animal. We wouldn't just, hunt for sport, and we always had a freezer full of venison, and I tried cougar at one point, which was strange, and so I've always grown up with a love of nature. It's always been near and dear to my heart. And when I took an environmental science class, it just kind of rang true to me. It really, really clicked. And we went to a fish hatchery. I remember that. And I remember just learning about, God, I don't even remember some of the facts that they told us, but just being so fascinated, and it was in the middle of the Sierra Nevada. So this fish hatchery is in the middle of the Sierra Nevada, which is just gorgeous. So I'm, like, daydreaming, thinking about lyrics to write because I'm a musician at the time, looking at these beautiful mountains because I used to escape and go to the mountains all the time in high school. I just, like, kinda skip school and go to the mountains sometimes, a 40-minute drive. And, I then took my first geology class. My official geology class was in college, which is actually one of the reasons I like to educate online because I didn't know anything about geology until I was in my freshman year of university. This honors program had a class every semester we had to take, and that happened to be the honors class at the time. So I took this geology course. And I absolutely just fell in love immediately, immediately. And just every fact I could gain, I just ate up. We went on a field trip, so they took us out just on a day trip out to the Mojave. It was magical to me. It showed me that, like, cuz I moved to the desert from Oregon and I was really angry about it for a long time.
It's
'Cause
a
I'm, like,
very it's
lush
very different.
greenery.
Yeah.
Right, I'm in all this lush greenery and then desert, dry, ugly. To me, it was ugly. And then I go to the Mojave and I see for the first time just this quiet beauty that I had never really experienced before. It was so different than the nature that I was used to, and it just kinda blew my mind looking at all these rocks and unraveling the story behind them with the knowledge that I'd learned in this one class, and the professor explaining what had happened and why it was tilted and why the rocks were fractured the way they were and why there were marine fossils out in the middle of the Mojave Desert. It was really mind-blowing to me, And it was funny too because that field trip was kind of a sad day. It was the day I broke up with my very first boyfriend. So I have a very mixed feelings of that day, but I remember the professor saw that I was kind of sad, and she really, really went out of her way to just kind of lift me up, and I'll never forget that. Not only was the trip amazing, but the professor was really kind and giving too, and that really touched me a lot. That meant a lot to me, and, the department was very similar to her. They were just very good I hate saying this, but down to earth people.
In a
And,
geology course.
yeah, yeah, and I absolutely loved everything about that trip, everything about it, and I immediately switched my major, immediately,
And so
because I also
these
realized
kinds of
oh, so
trips,
go ahead.
is that unique for these kinds of courses to be able to go out into the field? It seems like it would be something important, right, for
Yes,
geology to be in the field. So it's cool that it's like the first geology class that you
right,
took you out to the field and gave you this like it seems like a really world-changing experience because it's like you said, the difference in seeing the desert as gross versus like there's this beauty to it and there's the fossils to it and
right.
like leaving such a beautiful memory on you too.
Oh, yeah. It turned such a sad day into a beautiful day because I had broken up with my boyfriend that morning, or whatever had happened, and, it just turned into such a beautiful day, and that's like I couldn't pass that by. And I also realized too with the music theory is like, what am I gonna do with this? And it's not to put anybody down to the music degree or music theory degree. It's just that I realized that my options would likely be go through, get a PhD, maybe teach at a university if I'm lucky, because people are with PhDs in that field are kind of fighting more for those positions. More so than they are in geology, because in geology we've got mining and petroleum, we've got a lot of industry that people go out to.
Are any of
Or
the music bits that you recorded, are they, like, on iTunes or Spotify? Or if people wanted
mm-mm.
to listen to your singing and your music, how could one get to that?
It's just RockitSage, I don't how do I link? I don't even have your Twitch stream up just so that because I have a lot of anxiety all the time lately. I don't know why, it's been
We'll
really
grab it and
bad.
put it in the show notes, Sage, so
That's fine.
no
Yeah, that's
pressure.
fine.
Um,
But
that
it's on SoundCloud.
that's really, really cool. I
Mm,
didn't realize that you're also, like you
yeah.
had such an extensive background in music, and that also was, like, live like, recordings as well, like,
Mhm.
do you still have a like, so you went towards the geology and those sciences, but do you still have, like, an underlying passion for music?
Oh, yeah. My guitar's right here. I love this thing. It's my Ibanez. It's kinda dusty a little bit because I haven't had time to play in a while, but I haven't written in a while. I've been wanting to write. The art side of me is probably just as large as the science side. It's just how I put that art out. Currently, it's in the wall hangers and the jewelry. So it depends on which artistic hobby I'm doing at the time as to whether or not I'm actually writing music.
When I first met you, you were doing mineral photography on your stream,
Mhm,
and so that was always, I think, my first takeaway was the art and the science are 2 in 1, right?
mhm.
And that I
Yeah,
feel like is very important for a good science communicator. So it I guess does not surprise me that you're also very talented in other artistic fields too, like the music side and now the making and crafting with the jewelry is just
yes.
it's just really, really cool to be able to hear
Thank you.
that it was a passion of yours, and you also view the 2 as, like it's just integral to you as a
Yeah,
person, right? The science and
alright.
the art is the same kind of take. Uh,
I wouldn't be able to live without either, honestly. I wouldn't be able to live without either. I just love them both.
and you're good at both, madam. I still guys, it'll be in
Thanks.
the show notes, but the Patreon, does allow you to buy get some photo access to the incredible mineral
Mhm,
photography that Sage does. Okay, so you've taken this course, you're out in the middle of the Mojave Desert on a
mhm.
sad day that turns into a cool day.
Yes.
What is the next step? So it's like, if what did you take as the next step to, get your degree in geology? But what would you also tell someone like, I'm a new student here. I'm coming to my first undergrad. How do I even get into the geological sciences? And are there subsets of it? Like you said, because there's mining, there's educating, there's
Right.
like all these. Where do you even start?
So that's the thing. That's one of the reasons why I'm on Twitch educating geology, and I've been doing so for so long because it's not necessarily readily available. It's not like people learn about the rock cycle generally in K through 12, usually in grade school sometime, but they generally forget about it. Maybe there's a day or a week on volcanoes or some earthquakes or natural hazards, right? But you don't realize you're learning geology, and then people grow up for some I don't really know why anymore because I'm so saturated in the geosciences, but geology is just rocks to most people. It's just rocks.
Yeah.
Like rocks. Okay, rocks. And it's like, well, actually, it's volcanoes and earthquakes and glaciers and climate and the oceans and it's basically anything that's not living on the planet. We study that. We even study other planets. It's planetary geology. And some people call it exogeology, whatever you want to call it. I really don't mind. That's fine. Um,
So space rocks.
Right, space rocks. I've even held the moon, guys. I've held the moon. I'm so excited about that fact. I have to
Okay,
scream about
wh-
it.
okay, where does one hold the moon?
I went to when I was in my PhD, I went to the back end of the Smithsonian. I am very lucky, beyond lucky to have gone there. It was a field trip because I was a volcanology student. So I was doing volcanoes for my PhD. And we went specifically to see the magma chamber simulator. Yes, that's right. Magma chamber simulator. It's a literal room where they have these boxes, these huge thick metal boxes that while they simulate and generate magma within. And one of them had imploded before well, not yeah. Not while we were there, but it was just broken and dismantled. You could see like it's like a poofed out marshmallow.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
That,
So it was like we were just like, "Oh, no. Pressure temperature conditions got a little excessive, didn't they?" Like,
that's
"Oh, no."
simulating it quite well, right?
Yeah. So they simulated, some I don't know, I don't remember the chemical composition of what they were trying to simulate, but geez Louise, it was a lot. And I got to see, quite a bit back there. I'm so sorry, my ADHD brain. What was the original question?
No, where I think how did you hold a moon rock?
Oh, yeah, that's right. So that was behind the scenes. They had a room. There was actually a very special room where you had to, like, go into, like, with gloves and everything to hold some things, and, there was a microscopy room as well. So they basically it was in a little plastic container. So at that point in time, I didn't hold the moon yet barehanded, but I have held the moon barehanded. Because I know I have a colleague that did some work for NASA, and she has pieces of the moon that she's working on. She's like, "Do you wanna hold them?" I'm like, "Yes, I do." And so I got to hold piece of the moon, and, so they had pieces of that, they had pieces of meteorites, they had a variety of space rocks, and then we also got to look at them under the petrographic microscope, and it was very magical because rock under the microscope, I know sounds very boring, but it's really not because we look at them under polarized light and then we cross the polarization of the light. So we call it cross polars. And when we cross polarize the light, it allows these beautiful rainbow colors to shine when you spin the stage under the microscope. And it's actually really wonderful to behold, in my opinion. It's really gorgeous. Any geologist in chat would probably confirm, but it's something that I really enjoyed. And we learned a lot about just a variety of things. There was a giant meteorite. If you didn't know, most meteorites are very small. They're undetected, really. A lot of them burn up through the atmosphere. So anything that's big is very unusual. So we had there was a huge piece of a nickel iron meteorite that was just sitting in the back just as a display. And so I had a picture of that. I held this huge piece of olivine rich nickel iron meteorite. So I don't know if you've seen slices of meteorites that have those green stones that you can kind of see through.
Mhm.
Those are little olivine crystals or peridot. People know the gem peridot. That's what peridot comes from. Not necessarily space, but the mineral olivine, which occurs also on Earth. So, um, let me know if I go like too detailed or anything into
No,
any
I'm loving
direction.
this. I'm absolutely
Okay,
loving this.
that was I think every geology field trip I've ever been on has just been magical. And maybe I'm a big emotional person, so I feel things really, really intensely. So when I'm like happy and I'm experiencing these geologic field trips and things, I am just like exuberantly joyful. And so I have these just wonderful magical memories of these kinds of things. And I got to see the one of the things that really stood out to me was the scanning electron microscopy lab because I ran the scanning electron microscopy lab at my university for 4 years. And theirs was just top tier. Of course, it's top tier. It's the Smithsonian. And I was just drooling. I was just drooling. I'm like, let me just use this machine. Let me please just scan some thin sections in there." And it was so cool to see it all in action and to see the scientists actually working behind the scenes. So that's where I held a piece of the moon
That is really cool. It's also
one of the times.
I love how you explained too that geology isn't just rocks, right? Like
No.
a lot of
Yeah.
times, like if you think of microscopes, and not maybe not you, Sage, but like the general public, it's like, well, you're looking at cells, right? But like you're telling us like a scanning electron microscope, like you're looking at rock samples underneath, and like I know we're totally rabbit holing, but what when you're looking at a under a microscope at a scanning electron sample of a rock, what are you looking for? What is the science that you're gleaning from that image?
So when I've used the SEM, I've used what's called backscatter electron imaging, which is um there's different ways you can image things in a scanning electron microscope, which is cool. You can get three-dimensional images. So anytime you see like diatoms that are three-dimensional, they're using typically a scanning electron microscope. What I did was the images appear two-dimensional. And basically what it does is the one that I've used, there is a vacuum sealed chamber where you put the thin section or wait, sometimes they call it a bullet in. You have to carbon coat it and you carbon coat this thing, you put it in, you put a little piece of copper on there, pure copper, and you calibrate the machine first to make sure copper is reading correctly. But here's the cool thing. Here's the cool thing. So this vacuum single sealed chamber, right, is connected to this large tube, and at the top of this tube, there's a tungsten filament. And the tungsten filament is heated until it actually produces a beam of electrons that is 10 meters, microns, sorry, 10 microns in diameter. Meters would be insane. Oh my God. 10 microns in diameter, and, it literally zaps the sample, and it spits back information. I'm gonna just, go over I'm just gonna leave out the nitty-gritty. It spits back information and gives us basically ratios of elements such that let's say I'm identifying quartz, which has the silica or the formula SiO2. So when I see an image, it gives me little peaks. So it would be Si the silicon Si would be about a third of the height of the oxygen peak. And that's what I would expect to see. And then I basically use those ratios and there's also numbers involved as well to determine which mineral I'm looking at. So because of an electron beam, I get to determine exactly what I'm looking at, precisely what I'm looking at chemically. And it's really, really cool, I think.
It's
So that's
ama
what I used it for.
it sounds like wizardry,
It's
or
so fun.
which I guess is science, right? Like, it's
Yes.
almost like, I guess, the mass spectrometer for us where you put in a specimen and you get, like, the protein composition of it, but the fact that you're using an electron beam,
Mhm.
right, to be able to figure out what the composition is, or like, that is such cool information on top of getting, like then you got the beautiful image of it too, and you have
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
composition of it, like, that is amazing. Yeah, I would be stuck in that room all day too.
Dude, I for my master's, I lived in that room for like 12 hours a day. I'd throw a sample in the SEM and I'd click all the spots of investigation. I'd click like 30 to 50 spots on the image in question. And then I'd slide my chair to the other side of the lab. And there was my petrographic microscope. And that's where I do my point counting, which is horribly boring. And I'm not going to get into because literally, you're just getting a classification of the rock that you're looking at by counting 500 different points in a single thin section
What are
and
you
identifying each
counting?
one of those.
Like, what are you
You're identifying what the crosshairs are landing on. So in a thin section of rock, so it might be a pore space. So be
huh?
like, okay, pore space, or it might be a piece of quartz. So I'd write check quartz. Might be a rock fragment. So I check rock fragment, maybe write what kind of rock fragment, if it's igneous or metamorphic or whatever. It might be a mineral, and then I can be like, okay, chlorite. It might be a variety of things. It's a laundry list. It could be a
And
laundry list.
where is that information coming from? Like, is it your trained eye looking through the scope
Mhm.
that's looking at, like,
Yes.
those zones? So you have the training with your eyes to be like, "That's quartz right there,"
Yep.
and then you're Sage, that's not boring, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
I think so.
Like that
And it
is
it it
that is
oh gosh,
remarkable.
it was really fun. So I would just slide back and forth. So it would take like 30 minutes to an hour for the SEM to spit out the data I needed.
Mhm.
And so I'd take that hour and I'd point count, and it would take about at first it would take 8 hours to point count a thin section, and I got down to 4 for a thin section, and I had 86.
What
80
information, like, so after you've gone and, like, done this high level characterization, right, of this
Mhm.
specimen, what does one do that information with that information? Like, what is the next step? Like, what have I gained in terms of the data that I can do with and act on?
So now there's actually quite a bit. It depends on what you want out of the data. So I could, for example, just classify the rock precisely. And let's say it's a sedimentary rock. So now I know it's a Arcos sandstone, which means that it's got a certain percentage of quartz in it or something like that. So it has to meet a particular criteria. Maybe sedimentary rocks aren't the best example. It's just that I'm a sedimentologist, so I'm going to pick sedimentary rocks because there isn't actually an agreed upon classification scheme. Yeah, I know it sucks. It sucks so bad. It's so
Really?
annoying. Yeah, so bad. So it depends that it's because with sediments and sedimentary rock, there's so much information you can gather that there's different classification schemes for different reasons. So if I take the data that I've point counted, I say, okay, I want to know how much porosity is in this reservoir. I'll take let's say the number of thin sections I had from that reservoir, and I'll take the average. I'll say, okay, this thin section I point counted this many pore spaces, and so I would just do simple maths to determine the percentage of actual pore space. And be anywhere from like 5 to 25% depending on what I would for what I was looking at, because clays ironically, so things like shale where they frack to get the oil, there's actually tons of pore space in there. It's just not they're not connected pore spaces, so you can't get that oil out, which is why they crack it open.
Huh.
um but you could get you so you could determine porosity. So let's say we want to know how much pore space is in there because we're trying to, for example, the project I was working on, we were trying to determine whether or not those reservoirs were good to pump CO2 as a supercritical fluid into to
Mm.
mitigate greenhouse gas effects. So that was basically my project. And the best part about having run that lab was that I had about 10 other students at least come to me because they didn't want to train on the SEM. They didn't want to relearn the petrography to use petrographic microscope. So they're like, "Hey, you want to be a co-author?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do." So I ended up doing so much work, so much point counting, so many SEM analyses. So I actually got to see the before and after. So the reservoirs that we were looking at, I was doing one part of, right? I was looking at the baseline data to determine what was there, the classification of the rock exactly, and there was different layers that I was looking at in the earth about 10,000 feet deep. So I'm classifying a lot of different rocks that have layered, mostly sedimentary, that have layered over the Miocene and the Oligocene. So about I don't know, 18 million years ago or so, 23 to 18 million years ago or
So
so.
naive question for you, Sage. You're
Hmm.
sitting in this lab and you're
Hmm.
given these million of year old samples. So
Yes.
how is that delivered to you? Like, how is the sample collection work? So is it just someone, like, takes a shovel and, like, goes in deep? Is it one of those core samples? Where you
It's a
decide
core, yes.
so where do you
Yeah.
decide where to look? Like, how does that process work?
That process was really frustrating because the location of interest I had didn't have very many accessible samples because oil companies like to hide information and they don't like to share anything. So there were a lot of core samples drilled in that location. But companies like Chevron, Oxy, and all them, they're like, no, 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 no. We're going to keep this information. You can't have it. So even if a student wants it for information and they're still drilling in that location, they won't give you that core sample. They won't give you any information on that core. So I actually had to find, I only ended up finding just a few wells in the area that were I was able to obtain. So what I did was I went to the core lab, which is this huge warehouse filled with core. And in this case, instead of like the rock being exposed just because of a fault or tectonics or something like that, these are drilled via oil derrick. So what they do is they take a big, essentially, mine was about, I'd say I'm going to put it in imperial, because the oil industry is an imperial. So it's about 5 inches in diameter is the core sample that I worked with.
Okay.
And so they drill into the earth. They pull all of the mud first, the soil up, all the rock up, and there's a guy, girl, whatever, who is logging literally the material, all of the rock, logging it as it comes up. So there is a written record and there's a physical record of the rock that's being pulled up, and they lay it carefully out in order, so you know the top to bottom. So I went into Core Lab. I found some areas of interest in Core Lab that I was able to obtain. And I went there and I literally grabbed the core and I looked for sections that were not, how do I explain this? I looked for sections that were not clay.
So are you just literally grabbing a rod of
Yeah, yeah, just this big rock.
and
Just
it's
a
just
big,
like right, it's just going down like a
yeah.
staff and it's
So
just like
there's, yeah,
millions of years like down the line you can age and be like, all right, this is the zone I'm in.
yep.
Wild
So you
and
could go
cool.
the whole core, the whole core.
And it's just in
So
this
I,
lab area. You can just like,
mhm,
are you checking it out like a library
yeah,
book almost?
yeah. So it belongs to, in this case, it was Cal State. It
Okay.
belonged to the Cal State Core Lab. And there's tons of cores in that warehouse. There's so many it's just such a dusty big place. And it's just filled with all this rock, and it's just the towers of shelves you can't even reach. You have to get these big stairs, and you basically find your well, you find the boxes, you have to get these dang boxes out from these, there's spiders, there's all sorts of crap, there's no AC out there, and I'm living in the middle of the desert. So I had to find these wells, get the core, and find areas of the core that looked like, with I had to take my hand lens and I had to use the mud logging to find areas that the actual reservoirs existed rather than the layers that were impermeable, above and below the
And so
reservoirs.
that's like a by eye identification now at this
Right,
point.
right. So that's where the sedimentology comes in, because I have to identify what sedimentary rock I'm looking at quickly and easily such that I can pick the core section I want. Then I have to take that rock
Yeah.
and cut it with a saw.
Okay. All right. All right. So is this all in the warehouse still?
No, the saw's in the geology department.
Okay. So you've been able to leave the warehouse with
Yes,
this staff of rock,
right.
right? And so now you've ID'd the zone that you need, and that's all based on eye because you're just
Mhm,
trained the heck out of being a rockin'
mhm.
geologist. Then you're cut it. So where do you cut like a sliver off the side, or are you like physically cutting this thing into different zones to get like cross sections? Like how does one cut something like this?
So it sucks because you do end up destroying part of the core to do this. So you end up taking the core section you want and you want to get about a 2.5 by 1.5 by 1.5 centimeter bullet.
Hmm.
So we call it a bullet or billet. And it's just like this rectangular thing, rock. And it's a water saw because you have to cut rock with water. You can't just cut it dry. It would be disastrous. Um, and you also don't want to get the edges of the core because it could be potentially contaminated by mud, from the mud that was drilling, from mud, or anything really. So you want to get like a centimeter away from the edges of the core, and you want to just build like, so I would just kind of cut slivers, and then I would take that sliver, cut it in half, and then take basically the center of it and cut a bullet out of it. And then I would send that in to have a thin section made, because I could describe the process by which you make a thin section, and it's a pain. It's a pain in the butt.
Tell us.
Well, okay, so my advisor actually did it, and he's like, "You're gonna be really happy I'm not making you do this." He's like he's like, "You would," it's so that you would take those bullets, you would glue them to a thin section, and you polish it down with diamond paste. So you start with the grittiest, thickest, coarsest diamond paste until you get it down to about 25 to 15 microns thin on the thin section. And you have a wheel that's spinning, and you just grind it, polish it, polish it, polish it, and he was trained in it and actually was employed to do that for several years. He said he hated it. He hated it so much, and that sometimes, like, if you polish it a little too thin, it'll crack the thin section, and you're just like,
Yeah,
"Ah, everything's ruined." So, I'm very grateful. I did have to polish some of the bullets themselves. So, those you can actually stick in the SEM. You just can't use them for thin sections under the petrographic microscope. You need the
let's
rock to
see.
be extremely thin
For
to
the
use a
petrographic
petrographic.
microscope.
Yeah,
And is
yeah.
what feature of the rock, or is it maybe all the features, is why you need it to be thin?
Because you wouldn't otherwise be able to penetrate it with light.
Okay. So just like
Yeah.
the optics, gotcha. So I was just like,
Yeah,
oh,
that's
it's
it.
because you're
It's it.
looking for the pores or this one. No, it's like
No, that's just
fundamentally
yeah,
the
you won't
light
be able to
won't
see
get
through it.
through. Yeah, so that's actually what I was thinking. I'm like, wow, this process seems like it could go wrong. Very like for the thinning, right? Like as you're moving
Oh,
through,
yeah.
like because that's something that can go wrong even if we're going in and like biological samples, right? And thin sectioning,
Right. Right,
if
right,
you
right.
right, you can mess it up there too. And it just seems like I don't know, maybe this is naive me to think, but it's almost higher stakes for something like this because this core sample, it's not just like my fruit fly, which I can get another one of.
Well, I mean, you can get multiple samples from that same little area of well that you want. So it's not all is lost
Okay.
unless it is really like I've also collected igneous rock samples up in British Columbia, and I've had to crush those, and that's a whole thing with the jaw crushing machine, and just that's a whole other thing. So I could talk about that adventure a different time, or the adventure of me mapping for the USGS in the Southern Sierra. I picked up a lot of papers and publications and projects in my master's.
But so chat, what we were talking about before our BRB was kind of some of the research that Sage was doing, like doing some microscopy with some of these rocks, doing like thin sectioning, looking at different types of microscope, getting on papers, working at the Smithsonian, just being an absolute legend in geology. But we did jump the gun a bit. We jumped
Yes,
the gun a smidge. Where we had started from was that Sage would take her first geology course, and she got to go out into the field. And it was on the morning of breaking up with an ex. That boyfriend went away, and then anew came a love for a new type of science, which was geology. And
right.
Sage, I think one thing you really impressed with us before that story, or like as we rabbit hole, is how much geology actually entails, right? About the
Oh, right.
microscopy element, about the core samples, the collection type, the working with oil companies that don't want to
Mhm.
give you specimens, and just
No,
everything in between. So, how did you, when you got into the interest of geology, where was that original focus of like what you wanted to work on? Because that seems like it could be a very difficult and imposing question.
it is. It's a very difficult question to decide what you're going to basically pigeonhole yourself into geology. And it kind of freaked me out. It made me panic a little bit. So, as an undergrad, I didn't really think about it because I hadn't even really considered grad school. I was the first graduate of my family. Neither parent or grandparent or anything like that went to school. Well, my mom went to some community college, but she never graduated or finished. And I had no really direction, no real guidance. I hadn't really considered grad school. I hadn't really considered anything. And I was just kind of like la di da in my own little world. Like, I guess I'm taking the next courses for this. I wish that I could tell you I had a plan. I really didn't. I was left to my own devices. I had no guidance. I had no real nucleus to go to, and I've always kind of just been very, I guess I hate using the word impulsive, but impulsive, and this is what I'm doing now. Just this is what I'm doing now. And that's kind of what happened with geology. It's like I just kept taking the course after course after course after course. And I just fell in love with it. And I wasn't really thinking about what path am I going to choose. And as a senior, things did start to get more serious, and I did start to consider grad school. And I remember one day gosh, I wanted to do so many different things. And I didn't know what to pick. And there was some NSF funding, some National Science Foundation funding for climate and in the department. And I remember I had been bartending. I'd always worked full time. when I was, an undergrad, and I get called to my advisor's office, and I go in there, and he's like, "Quit your job, you're doing your master's, and it's completely funded by the NSF."
Wow.
And I just, like, was, like, blown away, and this actually happened. This literally happened. I just started crying because I hadn't considered anything. I didn't know what my path was gonna be, and I knew that I wanted at that point, I knew I wanted to go to grad school, but I didn't expect that to happen, and I had an RA, so it was on an RA, and which was extremely lucky because, I mean, I didn't have to TA. I didn't have to teach anything. I just got to run the scanning electron microscopy lab, and, so I basically lived in that lab 12 hours a day, and I loved it because I would take breaks, I'd go to the gym on campus, come back, do more work, etcetera. But, I where was I at? My brain.
So, like, getting into the lab, you're gonna be able to get your master's. It's
Right,
fully
right.
funded by the
So
NSF.
and I had to basically choose. So I wanted to work with well, he ended up being my advisor. I didn't know he was my advisor at the time. He was just the chair of the department, and that's who put and I really liked him. I'd gotten top scores in his classes in mineralogy and petrology, and he and I really connected, and he was considered this grumpy old man, and everyone was scared of him, and I absolutely adored him. And I would sneak his sodas, and I'd be like, "Hey, I took one of your Diet Cokes." And he's like, "Okay, that's fine." And everybody was like, "You did that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, he's not scary. Like, he's a nice guy. Just go and talk to him." And I absolutely adored him, and he's fantastic. And he did diagenesis, which is a very, very, very weird niche in geology that's kind of like so you know how there's 3 kinds of rocks, one of them being metamorphic?
Mhm.
So metamorphic rocks form and change, um, and literal crystals, new crystals can grow in the solid state. So without melting due to increased temperature pressure conditions. So things like burial, right? Deep, 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 deep burial. Um, such that maybe it's over 250 degrees Celsius, right? And temperature is actually the dominant thing here. When in my study over pressure. So we usually speak in temperature when we're talking about depth and things of rock and burial. So like it's kind of a niche portion of geology where I study everything from burial down to metamorphism. So that was kind of where I landed, and that's what he studied, and that's where oil reservoirs often exist. So
Is that why then you were looking and trying to connect with the oil companies to be able to get those cores?
right,
Gotcha.
right, because they had core in the area and the depth because we were looking for old oil reservoirs to pump CO2 into.
Mhm. And again,
And so
looking for
these
the
ones
porousness to be able
mhm,
to pump in, you needed those connecting porous components.
right. So, we needed old well, we didn't need, but old oil reservoirs are ideal because there's certain requirements to pump CO2 into the ground. You can't just pump it into the ground because there's space, right? You have to make sure because there's still groundwater in there.
Mhm.
And to make sure that groundwater is so saline and brackish that it's like way too expensive to clean and drink. So over 12,000 parts per million. There is you have to have a depth requirement, so it has to be at least I think it was 3,000 feet depth, and it can't leak for like it can't. It's supposed to be stable for 1,000 years. There's another requirement on the reservoirs that I have. It's kind of slipped my mind right now, but I blame the Benadryl. So that's all right. And so we aren't just pumping into areas that are just like, hey, haha, it's fun, it's free, it's open. So there are a lot of other requirements other than just being porous and permeable, which
Mm.
just means okay, there's space and the spaces are connected.
So the porous
Porous
and
the
permeable is like
spaces,
your first
yeah,
pass. Like, here
right,
is the first reason that I'm gonna go look at this.
right. So we knew because it's an old abandoned reservoir. So we know okay, there's already porosity and permeability there. Otherwise, there wouldn't be able to have been oil pumped. So we once that's abandoned. And by the way, when an oil reservoir is abandoned, there's still like 75% oil in there.
So why
It's
abandon
just
it?
because it's stuck to the grains of sediment in there.
Aha.
You
So
can't
if
get it
there was
out. So
ways to kick them loose,
which they're trying constantly.
mhm, then
They're
there
trying there's
you might go back to
yeah.
it.
So if you ended up getting a geology degree thinking, "I wanna be an a petroleum geologist and an exploration geologist, where you explore to try to find new oil. No. All the oil, most of the if you wanted a job in oil, you likely would never be exploring. That would be like the senior geologist, and you would end up being in what's called enhanced oil recovery. So you'd be looking at ways to, how do we get scrub the rest of this oil out of these reservoirs, until they abandon them. So these wells that I looked at were abandoned. So the oil companies don't care anymore. They're just like, whatever. And the core is given to the core repository. That's why it was available for me to study.
Gotcha.
So these wells are old. I think one of them was like 1930 something and one was 1960 something.
So then, just
So
again, another naive question. Why does the oil company then not wanna give you that data?
the if it's old and outdated and they think, okay, there's nothing in and around that area that we care about, so there's nothing anyone can obtain from studying this reservoir. And then
Mm,
they give the rock up.
gotcha, but if it's still,
They can't
like
get our secrets, they can't find where our new sites are, they can't, it's not related to anything we're doing.
gotcha. If there's a possibility they're making, like, some kind of money from it or some kind of
Yeah,
rediscovery, that's what they're keeping you from, like,
yeah.
wanting to be there.
It's just it all comes down to the money. If
Yep,
there's money available, then they're gonna hide it.
totally, makes sense.
And I mean, it's a business thing,
Yeah,
right?
yep,
Um, I personally, the oil thing wasn't for me. I was always on the academia side because I just loved learning and research. Loved it. I went unfortunately, not unfortunately, but I went to an oil school though. But here's the good thing about going to an oil school is that hydrogeology, water is huge because water and oil are, well, both housed in sedimentary rock, and that's what we're looking at here, and that's what we have here where I live. So hydrogeology was really big. So I ended up taking a lot more hydrogeology. I did take several high level petroleum geology courses. So if you have questions about petroleum geology, yes, I can answer them. Most likely, hydrogeology was the other thing that was the path that I took, because those were the two paths basically that forked off into the one. So I took the classes necessary for the hydro major, but then I asked them, "Can you just put general geology or, geology as the major rather than, niche me into one or the other? Because I'm not sure what I, wanna do." Like, I'd already had my master's project set up, looking at diagenesis, right? Looking at all these chemical reactions and things that happen due to increasing pressure with depth, and it gets very interesting and complex, and I have tons of cool images and things I could send your way for another time maybe.
absolutely.
Um, but I could totally talk about some microscopy of these rocks. I mean, I also have microscopy of a turbidite off the coast of Japan. Like, there's just I have crazy so many I don't understand how I got so lucky to do so many projects, quite frankly. And that's actually the reason why I have a lot of publications under my name with just a master's. And I need to stop saying just a master's. I just want to pause and correct that for a moment, because there's nothing wrong with having a master's and not a PhD. That's okay. And I just need to remind myself of that. And I like to. I'm sorry if that's weird, but I want people to know that that is okay.
No, it's a
Um,
good thing to reassess, and also what I hope that people would take away here, the story that you're telling of all the experience that you have, it is obvious that you are the expert. No one should question your knowledge. This is the story that you've told us so far tonight is just such a small fraction of all that you've done.
I know.
I mean, there should be no questioning, even if there was no master's, even if there was no college graduation, I would not question that
Right.
you are the expert because you have the experience, you have the training. Ma'am, you were looking through thinly sliced rocks under the microscopes and
Oh my
identifying the
gosh.
minerals in there just by eye. Like,
Yeah.
that should be celebrated. Your knowledge and you should be celebrated. And yes, like you said, there is no just a master's. You
Right.
are trained and you have the degree for it. And it's incredible that you're willing to share that level of knowledge.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just I'm trying, because sometimes people will catch me and be like, "What do you mean just a master's?" I'm like, "You're right. You're right. You're right."
I
So I
have the
appreciate you
same
saying
thing
that.
because I grew up in a household where, what do you mean you're just getting a PhD? Why aren't you
Wow.
getting the MD?
Wow.
The MD is what matters. You're not a real doctor.
Wow. That's crazy.
So that's the I understand the vibe of it too, because it's just like, well, you don't belong with this. Like, what are you
Right,
doing? This is
right,
like,
right.
but no, it's and I think what also goes under said is masters in different fields are very different,
Oh,
right?
very much so.
Like the requirement for a master's in X will be very different than in Y. And ma'am, I'm sorry, but the story that you're telling us, they might as well give you 2 doctorates at this point, like, honestly, like, of all that you were into and all that you were a part of, like, that is a huge and phenomenal amount of work. And also, BT dubs, y'all, most masters are not paid by the NSF, right?
No,
Most
no, they're
masters,
not.
you are paying money to be able to
Mhm.
go there and get that degree. They
I was
saw
very,
so
very
much talent
lucky.
in Sage that they were just like, "Here, take this funding. We're just gonna give you all of it." And that is incredible.
I
So
never thought about it that way.
so, Sage, how did you get to then Twitch? So it's right, you've got this clear passion for geology. You're getting your
Mhm.
master's in geology. When about in that journey did you decide to become a science communicator?
I was in my master's and I started okay, I was just playing Amnesia: The Dark Descent one day because I grew up playing PC video games. I love gaming. And I was playing Amnesia: The Dark Descent because I like things that are scary. And I grew up playing Diablo 1, 2, and 3 as a little girl, and I'd sometimes make my little brother stay in the room because I'd be so terrified. And but I love these scary games. I'd read Goosebumps, and then I'd put the books in his room at night because I was so scared they'd, like, I don't know, come alive and eat me or something, like, I don't know, like, it's better if they eat him, like, what a jerk. So, I don't know, I was playing this game and, my roommate, Tim, was laughing. He's just laughing at me play this game, and I'm like, "What? It's so funny." He's like, "Your reactions, your face, it's hilarious." I'm like, "What do you mean?" "Oh, my face is hilarious. Ha, ha, ha." And he's just like, "It is. You're animated and all these things." He's like and then my, best friend, one of my besties came over and he's like, "Oh my gosh." He's like, "You need to stream on Twitch." I'm like, "No, no, 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 no." I used to watch Justin TV back in the day. I'd watch competitions of, like, old school gaming and, um, I think actually that's even how I found out about Monster Hunter? I don't know, but the old school Monster Hunters, like old ones. Anyway, no, I think that was a friend, but started streaming one day and I'm not a get in front of person kind of person. I'm a like, I'm gonna hide and write music and like you guys can listen to it on the radio, but I'm not gonna perform it unless there's like a sheet in front of me. Like I just I'm good. So I was very meek and very shy. And it's funny because streaming has helped me become a better teacher. And I'll get into that later, but it helps me get in front of people a lot, which is great. But I started streaming Diablo 3 and I, like, had an audience. There's I think 5, 10 people maybe the first day or 1, 2, or 3. It was very 2015. I mean, like, is you could actually pop on and get a small number pretty quickly, um, way back then. It's changed now, but, I started streaming scary things, but I had a geologic poster of California behind me and a periodic table. And I never thought about it. I just had my desk set up and that was my little space. And my roommate had his desk set up and that was just I had this laptop and I had this headset with a gaming speaker and it was really janky and I think I had a monitor plugged into my laptop and I was streaming this video game and I'm just kind of a chaos person. I have no real direction and I'm impulsive and I like to have fun and I just started enjoying people, and they were really nice to me. And I learned how to deal with trolls early on. Trolls were, gosh, some of them were savage, and you that and bartending. I think the early Twitch trolls and bartending really helped me gain a huge backbone. That and being in male dominated fields my whole life. So I think that was what gave me the backbone I have today. But I after people started asking me questions geologically about the poster in the background, they're like, "Okay, what's going on with that?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a geology major." And they'd ask what I was doing with my master's, and I talk about my master's, and I ramble like I do right now. And I I'm sorry if you can always stop me, by the way. And I was like, I saw one day there was somebody talking about space on the front page, and this was about 2016, the end of 2016 maybe, and I'm like, "Wait, what? You we're allowed to do other things than gaming?" 'Cause I thought it was only, like, gaming or you're banned kind of situation.
Right.
And, so I was like, "I'm gonna try that once a week," and then it became, like, twice a week because I was streaming, like, 5 days, and I was streaming so much for so many years, and it just suddenly became 2017 became, "Alright." It was about 50-50, and then 2018 was basically full geology, full geology. I don't know I don't even remember the last time I gamed on Twitch, which kinda makes me sad a little bit, but I'm trying to bring that back a little bit. I would like to get into some gaming, but most likely my favorite is horror. It's scary genre, so if you do happen to catch me gaming, be prepared to it might be scary, but p my face makes it hilarious apparently, so that might help you watch.
Like, I feel like you played recently a horror game with a friend on stream.
Oh, that I did have a friend play a horror game because they were like, "No scary movies, no scary games, no scary books, nothing." I'm like, "You are playing" what was it, Outlast, I think? Was it Out did I make them play Outlast?
It was
Something
spooky
terrifying.
where all I could do was put up a lurk and I had to walk away
Yeah,
because
no,
it was
it's
so
I
scary.
picked something because I wanted something that would, like, off the bat jump, because
Yeah.
a lot of games are a slow burn and make you lull you into a false sense of security, and then you're like, "Oh my god!" And, so I wanted something with a quick like a sparkler instead of a candle, and, I got what I wanted, and I kept walking out of the room, and I kept walking back in the room and scaring them, and that was really fun. So I didn't actually play that game that time, but I have played that game before.
And to set the stage, at that point, there was no science category on Twitch when you started doing this
No,
educational content.
no,
So,
there
what did you
there
even
was not.
stream in?
Just chatting no, it was called IRL then. It was called IRL.
So far enough back in the day, like, there wasn't a just chatting, it was, like,
Mm.
games, IRL,
There's
and
very few
music?
categories.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so
I think so. And we could still listen to music all we wanted. Any musics. It was great.
so
And we had song requests and everything.
yeah, I mean, that's, well, nowadays, I guess there's the DJ programs, they're able to play
Mhm.
copyrighted music, but, yeah, you can't be playing it if you're not in the DJ program, and so, yeah, stuff's changed a lot, but
That is strange.
how does it feel to have been the pioneer then that kinda drove that the science on the platform? Like, you also led a panel at a TwitchCon, well,
Mhm.
I can't remember now if it was pre or post-COVID,
It was
uh,
post-COVID,
but
pre-COVID.
that, like, highlighting education on the platform, so it's like, you are, like, one of the founders of there being education here. It's quite remarkable, Sage, that you're, like, not only an educator IRL, like, in a classroom, but also have led the and trailblazed the field for so many that nowadays, like, I mean, it's not a mainstream category by any stretch of
Mm-mm.
the imagination, but there's much more regular people, like, taking
Mhm.
part and being there, and, like, just
I'm really
how does something like that feel?
I never really considered myself a pioneer or a founder ever, ever. I just like, we're doing this. That and I know you mentioned it. There was a team called Brain Bites prior, and it was one of the Brain Bites members. There was maybe I think 8 of them. One of the Brain Bites members was the one on the front page that I had seen. And myself and Dr. WD-40 were invited to Brain Bites right before they kind of fizzled out. And then, but Dr. WD-40 and we just started a Google Doc of people that we knew that did education. And it was very short. The list was very short. It was very much a little bit on one page. And then slowly that page filled and I'm like, "Hey, I'm gonna make a Discord." And we slowly made socials and just made sure to at least secure our name places. And now the Discord is it's huge. There's thousands of people in there, and I'm trying to work on various things. This is the Knowledge Fellowship, and we really didn't know Dr. WD-40 and I and Uncle Bill didn't really know what we were doing when we started out. We're just like we were making this list. And then it turned into a Discord and turned into a community. And suddenly we had connected tons of people. AGSA, Das Valdez, Horizon Psi, early on people, Demon Machine, Skylius, so many early people. Star Strider, because Cosmo, she's also founded Cosmo Quest as well. Star Strider is still kicking and going, and she's amazing. She's one of my personal people that I look up to. That she's an astrophysicist, and she still goes live. And I'm just like I'm very honored to say that she's a friend of mine, and I'm honored to say that you're a friend of mine too. And the people I've met on Twitch because of education, it blows my mind. It really blows my mind. So I honestly never ever thought like, "Oh, I'm a pioneer, I'm a founder, I'm doing these things." It was just kind of, "What are we doing next? What are we doing next? What are we doing next? What are we doing next? How do we connect these people? How do we connect these people? How do we find a way to categorize this stuff so people can find what they wanna watch?" And it just kinda started to grow. And how do we find a way to welcome educators? How do we find a way to let people know that they're being basically supported by us and they can say no at any time if they choose? There's no obligation. We just want to let people know education's here and it's free. And it is now one of my largest passions in life that it's obviously part of like my heart. I I want education to be available to anyone regardless of demographic, regardless of anything. And I get very emotional sometimes talking about these things. Like I think the world in general, we would be so much better off if we just had this general shared knowledge that we could all talk about together, and not necessarily all be experts, of course. Like people do different things, but have our niches and at least have a general, I don't know, sense of things, because right now it's kind of scary sometimes
Yeah,
with the
absolutely.
misinformation that's floating around. And I also really don't like how paywalled everything is. It's a problem. It's a problem with the misinformation, and it's a problem with everything being paywalled. And I do dare to say this. This was actually somebody else had mentioned this, and I do agree with them that degrees sometimes don't necessarily represent intelligence, they sometimes represent privilege. And I I wanna fight that. I want that to change. I want academia to not be a money-making machine where it's bloated with things we don't necessarily need, or whatever. I'm not into the nitty-gritty of what all the things in the university system other than what I do, but I would like to see education shared and not paywalled. Right,
One thing that you said that I think really resonates too is that having the degree doesn't inherently mean that you're smart. But I
right.
feel like even if you are smart and you have the degree, the other side of the coin is you are privileged because you've gone through that training. Like
Right.
I
Right.
did not go through the training that you went through to have all that access to the geological knowledge, and that's
Mm-mm.
the fact that you feel that it's a responsibility to disseminate that information, right? To make it so that other people who don't have access to that geological education and knowledge, and you're gonna be the one to impart it. That's huge. And it just goes to show, like, you have the training in all of these different avenues, you have the experiences, and you're willing to pass on that information. Like, that is something that should be applauded and celebrated. And again, not just in you, but in anyone who does something like that,
Right, I
who's gone
agree,
through
I
that
agree.
expertise.
Like,
Um,
what you and Lita do impress me. I can't I am blown away by the level of production, everything you're able to do, and it makes me absolutely delighted to see education is, like, coming this far on Twitch with channels like yours. So, um, just thank you. Thank you for your hard work too.
and none of this is possible without you, Sage. And I recognize that we've this isn't the first time I've told her this, y'all. I tell her this all the time, is that she is the pioneer. And so
No, 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 no.
I could not be here chasing this dream without you having started it. And that goes for
There's a
any,
lot of people that inspired me that had that lit the flame for sure.
but
I'm
it's
sorry, I can't help it.
I will attribute it right back to Rocket Sage, y'all. Forever and a day, I will always attribute it back to her. As you, so you're on Twitch in during the master's degree. Right, and so what was the next degree step in terms of, like, the career path? Like, how did you decide what could be like, you're educating on the side, right, as
Mhm.
you're streaming a little bit more and more here with the scary games, but also the geology, and you're running with the master's degree. How does one decide what is the next step to do?
That's the thing is I knew I wanted to stay in academia and I wanted to research really badly. I loved it. I loved the SEM. I loved the lab. I loved being out in the field because I did map for the USGS for 6 weeks as well. And I did, which meant a lot of hiking, a lot of rock collection. And I did a lot of, I actually was trained to pick and numerically date zircons and apatite from the stage of crushing a boulder, from collecting the boulder to crushing it, cleaning all these parts of machine, climbing on machinery to take it apart. Oh my god, that's a whole story. I had to write a lab manual for that too. But I've learned a lot. And can you? I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question? My brain is like going off in a
No, no, no,
rabbit
no,
hole,
it's,
and I'm starting to get close to my bedtime. So I'm like, what is happening? Benadryl and bedtime.
like, how did you decide what was the next step in the career
That's a
journey?
that's oh gosh. So aside from all those little tangents I just spiraled onto, I had all these different things that I'd done, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but there was a professor that left, and he was the one who I did the mapping project under, and he went off to another university on the East Coast, and he was a volcanologist. He is, actually. He's a great volcanologist. He's fantastic. And I, worked really well with him, so I decided that I wanted to go on that path. Before that, my advisor, right before I defended my master's thesis, my advisor went out of town for like 2 months ice climbing. So my university was like, "Do you wanna teach a class?" And I'm like, yeah, I have no TA experience. That would look great for my university applications." So I did that. So I did that for a couple years, like 2 years, and then went off to my PhD. So I wanted to gain some teaching experience before I left, such that I had RA and TA as well. I had full classes and everything, which was terrifying the first time, let me tell you. But I, had full classes, and, so I'm glad I had that experience, and then I decided to go off and do volcanology, volcanoes. So I went from basically essentially doing hydrogeology to diagenesis, which is kind of between basically, I'm a sedimentologist and geochemist from that, and then I went into volcanoes, volcanology, and I did 1 year of my PhD, and unfortunately, and I was still streaming. I wasn't streaming as much because the PhD, of course, took a lot of my time. They did put a clause he made sure to put in a clause that I wasn't allowed to work anywhere. He was worried I was gonna burn out, and, because I never really stopped. I was like an Energizer bunny, and so I didn't work anywhere, but they didn't pay very much. This wasn't like the NSF. The NSF they pay. The department in which I was at did not. So it was very difficult. I ate like once a day. I ended up getting a small cancer scare, and that combined with some other things I'm just not going to get into personal things. I ended up just kind of I wasn't really able to focus anymore. Wasn't able to focus on my what I needed to do to get done. So I went to my advisor and my committee, and I'm like, "Hey, this is what's happening." And they're like, "You can take up to 2 years health leave." And I took a year and I came back, and they basically gave me they didn't basically. They gave me parameters that were impossible tasks to complete in a very short time frame. So they essentially legally kicked me out. And there was really nothing I could do. I'm finally okay with it. I'm finally like this like there's other paths, there's other things I can do, right? And I it just it devastated me for years. It devastated me for years. I had finally around the same time got a partner on Twitch, and the combination of the push of Twitch and the failure, not failure, because I didn't fail. I essentially was kicked out of the PhD. I crashed. I crashed and burned hard. And only up until recently, I'm still a little bit wavering from time to time. I'm sure it's not a hidden thing. I think it's pretty obvious. Um, but for the most part, I've healed quite a bit, and I've come a long way from that, and I put a lot of effort into then developing the Knowledge Fellowship and driving education to be, well, not paywalled, to be shared from experts for free. And that's really like where that's kind of I just gained this huge passion for that. And not just that, but really I wanted to share my science because I realized too that geoscience is not something that is very well known or taught that often. And I didn't know very much about geology at all until I was made to take a class from an honors program in university. And like the majority of the US does not go to university. It's difficult. There's a variety of reasons. And so I thought, well, sharing my science is probably a good idea, considering it's not very well known. And there's a lot of things like, well, volcanoes and earthquakes and drinking hazards, water contamination, things like that that we need to share and talk about. So I decided that and people keep asking me to say, "Hey, are you going to go back for PhD? Are you going to go back for PhD?" No, I'm not. I found that I'm still doing research, and if it gets to a point where I can no longer do research, full stop, period, then I will then consider going back for a PhD. That I guess is my answer because I just as long as I can continue researching, as long as I can continue contributing to the sciences and contributing to educating the masses through SciComm, I think I will be happy because ultimately at the end of the day, all I want to do is help people. And I have already ideas for something after the Knowledge Fellowship because I do genuinely want to make the Knowledge Fellowship a nonprofit. And I have ideas for something years to come that has nothing even to do with Twitch. Just something to do with helping people geologically and whatnot.
And that's, I think, well said. And someone in chat said that you're the bedrock of
Oh,
of the science communication here on the platform, and
that's
that's
funny.
it's pretty incredible of everything that you do, Sage, for so many. And I'm sorry you had to go through that. That's
No, no,
it
no.
seems like
It's
there's a lot of folks like in academics, right, where it's like this situation arises. It's like, you know what, we're just gonna cut ties with someone because we
right.
can. Um, and it's really, really hard to grapple with. I know Lead and I have both grappled with something with this similar instances as well. And it's hard
I'm
to
sorry to
because
hear that.
it's it's taken away from you without you having
Right.
made the choice. But
Right.
one thing that I think has helped me is to think about like you wouldn't be where you are without that experience
Mm-mm.
today, and like the
No,
level of
exactly.
value that you put on education and give to the masses, like probably been influenced by that experience, and that
Oh,
probably makes you
absolutely.
like an even more passionate educator, which is
I
you're
yes.
already like we getting comments in the chat of like Sage is making this so cool and exciting, and it's because that passion's like right shining through. Where you get the wrong person, and it's just gonna be like, here's a rock.
Right, right, right,
And that's not who you are. You're just like, "Oh
right.
my god, let me tell you about this rock."
Oh
And
my
it's
god,
just
yes. Like there's so many rocks right here. I mean, just already shiny. I can't help it. It's just too much.
it's beautiful. As we're rounding
So
out our
many.
discussion, one
Sure.
question that we've asked all of our guests who've been on this series, and for, again, because it's Women's History Month, we're celebrating women in STEM. What does it mean to you to be a woman in STEM and to be a pioneer in education?
Oh my gosh, that's a big question. What does it mean to me to be a woman in STEM? I feel a sense of pride in it. I honestly do. I feel a sense of like I'm proud to be a woman contributing to the sciences. I don't find myself to be any less than anyone else, and I don't find myself to be any more than anyone else. I find myself to be just as capable to contribute to the sciences as anyone, regardless of labels, anything like that. So I'm proud of myself for overcoming my life, my things, just like all of you have had to overcome many different things. And I'm happy. I'm happy to be a woman in the sciences. I wouldn't want to change it. And as for being a pioneer in in the sciences, it's weird sometimes to think about because I have been flown out before for my expertise on this early on before early TKF years, and somehow TKF was found out about, and they I was flown out to San Francisco for my expertise on education, and that was really one of the I felt it was called the IFTF. I'm so sorry, I cannot remember the acronym. international, it's been so many years. The future, I'm so sorry. It's the IFTF. They flew me out. I'm trying to find the acronym. They don't have their own acronym defined. That's funny.
People
What
should
the heck?
just know. It's we're not gonna tell you. You
It's
should just
iftf.org. Anyway, they flew me out and there was maybe 20, 30 people. They flew out these random people on expertise on education and it was that moment that I was like, "Wait, what? People are taking me why? What? Why am I here?" Oxford University was there, and I was very nervous. I was very, very nervous because they paid for everything just to fly me out for a day, and, I'm still in communication with them occasionally, but they do a lot more than just education. They do quite a bit. There's a wide array of things that they focus on, this organization, and, I around that time, I think I got the panel for TwitchCon or for TKF, TwitchCon TKF panel, and, I realized, "Oh my gosh, like, I can really kinda carve my own path, and I can help the educational community in a big way." And on top of that, at the end of the day, this is something I didn't even realize that was happening. I became a really well-rounded geologist over the course of all these years of just teaching and people asking the most random questions and material sciences, engineering, all sorts of stuff, and I'm like, I know so much now, and I'll tell you too, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. So, don't forget that. But, I hope I answered your question clearly.
absolutely. Thank you, Sage.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm kind of a rambly, sleepy mess right now. I'm
No,
so
I
sleepy.
again, I think this has been an incredible conversation, and thank you so much for joining us.
Mhm.
We would love to have you back
Yeah, I'd
for
love to be back.
Sage round 2 through 17.
Sure.
I'm just assuming it's 17, and then it's just we'll just have to have more after that. Sage, thank you again for your time. Guys, remember, this is your founder of Science on Twitch. Don't let her forget it, and you don't
Oh
forget
my
it either.
gosh.
None of us would be here without her. So, Sage, big thank you from all of us for everything you've done for the education on the platform and for just joining us tonight and sharing part of your story.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys. Have a great night.
That was our conversation with Rocket Sage. You can find links to all of her social media accounts in the show notes. Thanks for listening.